Okie dokie, I think we're broadcasting. Welcome, everybody.
Hey y'all, my name is Amal. I'm an organizer with Decarcerate Utah, and today we're continuing our series on what abolition looks like from a global perspective. I'm super excited for all of y'all to join us, and would like to start off by introducing all the amazing panelists that we have here with us tonight. Would you like to go first, Jordan?
Sure, yeah. Hey y'all, my name's Jordan. I'm a national organizer with the Campaign to Fight Toxic Prisons, FTP. We do work at the intersection of environmental justice and abolition, and work on bringing together our movements that have been traditionally siloed to help build a focus on the environmental implications of the prison and how we can fight it using environmental tactics. I'm also the National Prison Closing Coordinator for the National Council of Incarcerated and Formerly Incarcerated Women and Girls. And I just started that gig 3 weeks ago, so hit me up and let's shut down some prisons.
Sweet, that's awesome. Mariella, would you like to go next?
Sure thing. My name is Mariela Mendoza. I am an undocumented artist, educator, illustrator, writer. Currently living and resisting here in so-called Salt Lake City, Utah, occupied Shoshone territory. I am the co-director of Uplift, which is a youth-powered, youth-led organization that fights for climate justice and just the general liberation of our people here in the Four Corners region, the Colorado Plateau. I am happy to be here and excited, and shout out to anyone who is undocumented and resisting against borders watching this. I love y'all.
Hell yeah. Ashley, do you want to go next? Sorry, Ashley, we can't hear you. You're on mute. My bad.
I forgot I was muted. I'm Ashley. I am Ashley Finley. I'm also living here in so-called Salt Lake City, Utah. I'm a doula, educator, activist, currently working with the People's Energy Movement, a co-founder of Salt Lake City Black Lives Matter, and then I'm also working with Utah Conversations on Anti-Blackness. So nice to see you all. Thank you for having me.
Thank you all for introducing yourselves. I would like to take a moment to talk about what is going on currently in Utah with the Justice for Bernardo campaign, and I would like to hand that off back to Mariella, if that's okay.
Yes, so the Justice for Bernardo campaign here in Salt Lake City, Utah originated about a month or two ago after Bernardo Palacios Carvajal was shot dead by local Salt Lake City police officers. Bernardo was only 22 years old. He was an artist. He was a member of our community. He was a brother. He was an uncle. He was a son. Just yesterday, I believe it was yesterday, y'all. Sorry, days are going by so fast. But just yesterday, the local district DA here decided that the officers that murdered Bernardo will not be facing charges. And as you can imagine, we're pretty pissed off about it here in Salt Lake City. Salt Lake has had nonstop protests since Bernardo was murdered. Bernardo passed away just 2 days before George Floyd was killed. So for us, it's been a very intersectional moment here where we've been fighting not just for justice for George Floyd, but also fighting for our homie. It was on Thursday. What day is it? It's Saturday. Okay, yeah. Sorry. Days are not a thing anymore. We've been fighting for nonstop for like straight up 5 weeks, taking the campaign to the streets, taking the campaign to the courts, really just trying to get everybody to know and understand Bernardo's story, and to understand our rage as community and where it's coming from. I'm gonna share my screen just so I can share a photo. This is a mural. This is just part of a mural that myself and my comrade Jorge made just earlier in the week. We made it in Park City. It's 300 feet wide. As I mentioned before, that's part of my job is as an artist, as a propagandist, is to push narratives to the front that usually aren't being talked about. And so for us, it was really intentional to have this, to make this. We have a saying in the Justice for Bernardo campaign that we say, todo lo que hacemos, lo hacemos en su nombre. Everything we do it in Bernardo's name. And so for us, you know, making sure that people don't stop knowing the story of this young person in our community who was murdered straight up, like just a few blocks away from my house, is really important. Today we have had yesterday we had multiple organizers arrested within the Justice for Bernardo movement. Today police showed up just about an hour ago, 2 hours ago, and very violently took Manny from one of our homies' houses. And so these are things that are happening in real time. This is not something, you know, that I think for Salt Lake City folks, if you're watching, this isn't something that's just happening on your phone. This is literally like happening a few blocks away from your house for some of y'all, you know? So I think when we have conversations about abolition, it's important for us to ground ourselves into like, the reason why we're looking towards abolitionist futures is because the future that we currently live in, the trajectory of the future that we're currently going towards is not a safe trajectory. The world that we are living in is not safe for all of us. And so until there is justice and peace for all of us, there is no justice and peace for nobody.
That is super important. Thank you so much, Mariela, for speaking on that. And if y'all please follow their Instagram account, Justice for Bernardo. There's also a Venmo as well. Please donate it if you can. I'll try my best to insert the links to both of them in the comment section below, and also their Facebook page as well. We gotta fight for it in our own backyards as well. So I would like to start off by asking, so how does abolition show up in all y'all's work, and what was your path towards abolition looking like? Anyone could go first. Ashley, would you like to go first? Sorry.
Yeah, okay, wait, full transparency, what was the second half of that question? I'm so sorry. I didn't want to answer because I was like, I don't remember, I didn't hear it quite well.
No worries, it's all good. I was just asking, like, what was y'all's path to abolition look like?
Our path to abolition. Okay, so currently, the work I'm doing involves this idea that oppressed and marginalized people have an innate and inherent and ancient wisdom of what it means to take care of ourselves and our own communities. And so in most of my work, including my work with Black Lives Matter Salt Lake City, which is a new chapter, is meant to kind of highlight and uplift that notion that that really what we see as, you know, like this quote unquote justice system, I call it the injustice system, is a side effect of colonization and a side effect of imperialism and also genocide. And so all of my work, I always try, in all of my work, whether that's with an org or whether that's helping parents give birth and making sure babies are good and safe, I center the idea that what colonization and what the transatlantic slave trade did was steal and kind of I'm so sorry, I'm trying to like make sure that my thoughts are clear, but I'm kind of all over the place, especially with thinking about Bernardo. But what colonization and the transatlantic slave trade did was steal the ancient, like, it didn't steal the ancient wisdom, but it stole our ability to practice what we know within our communities and with our families. And so for me, a path to abolition, what that looks like is, it looks like first acknowledging what this police force, what this prison system is, right? And what that is a tool to create kind of fodder for the machine of white supremacy. And that's really what it is. Like, the police force that we have started in this country as a way to keep free Black people in line during the Reconstruction era, meaning the police force was literally literally started essentially as what we would think of as slave catchers, right? Black people getting too free, let's go round them up, take them back, kill them, beat them, intimidate them, whatever we can do. So if that is the inception of what we call our justice system, then for me, there's no idea of reform, right? Because the system is doing exactly what it was meant to do. So it has to be like struck down in its entirety, because as a Black woman living on American soil and as a descendant of enslaved people, like, there's no kind of peaceful transition in mind for me, right? Like, I see what exists, and I see that it needs to end now. And I see what exists, and I see that it needs to be torn down now, because, like, this uplifting of this, like, bullshit system is in effect, like, continuing a system that killed and murdered and enslaved my ancestors. And so there can be no sort of reform in my eyes, right? Black and Indigenous people have been kind of the fodder of the machine of white supremacy in this country since this country's inception. And so to answer your question, I guess, I'm sorry not to get on my soapbox, but to bring it right back around and answer your question, what that looks like is a lot of grassroots community relationships with people who are living on the margins and who are dealing with a system that moves to oppress them, but to, like, find commonality and to understand, like, uplift each other's wisdom, each other's ancestral wisdom. Like, I live close to Ella, and I know that they have a ton of medicine just, like, in their spirit, right? And so what does that look like for me? That looks like uplifting Ella and doing what I can to support Ella so that that medicine can be distributed through the community of Black Indigenous people of color. So I hope that answered your question. I'm so sorry. I was a little like...
No worries, it's all good. That was actually such a beautiful answer, and it's so true. I love how you were talking about there is ancestral wisdom, and oftentimes people love to diminish that or overlook it. It's like, no, the answers the answers are within our community. We could solve it. We have the power within us. Sorry. Let's see. Next, Mariela, would you like to go?
Yes. Can you repeat the question? I'm sorry.
No worries. So the question was, how does abolition show up in your work? And what does your path to abolition look like?
Okay, yes. Oh my goodness. Ashley, I love you so much. That was so, so beautiful. And thank you. I am ridiculously blessed to be in community with you. I think, oh my gosh, you said so many good things. Well, first of all, let's start with the ancestral wisdom there. Oh man, when I think of ancestral wisdom, I think of this like ocean of love that our ancestors had been working on, you know, to steep this knowledge. I almost think of like, that deep bowl of chicha, of medicina. Like, I picture the ancestors missing it and being like, this is that good, this is for the kids. And I think that when the colonizers came through, they were like, we gotta plug this shit. Like, this is their power. And they tried to put a plug on it, right? But the thing is that juice is so strong, that ancestral wisdom is so strong, that there's trickles that still come through, even through the colonizers. They're just desperately trying, right? And what does that look like? That looks like media, constantly being exposed to media that doesn't show Black and brown bodies, indigenous folks in charge of our own, way of life. It goes to show the way that science itself, right? Why is it that our ancestral traditions are not seen as science, but instead all of these other whack-ass ways of abusing Mother Earth are seen as science, right? And, from a climate justice perspective, the way that they use that as a justification for continuing to dig into the earth and for continuing to exploit, Pachamama, Mother Earth, instead of, actually like seeing our mother as our sibling, as our relative, and as our birthplace, right? Our home. Oh man, just when you were talking about sharing medicine, I think that's something that I think a lot about too, that's what I think of. If I could trace back everything that I guess I do, because I'm part of the millennial gig economy where we have a lot of gigs. I'm, like you yourself, you were talking about it. You're a poet, you're a doula, you're so many wonderful things. I identify as an illustrator, a muralist lately, and also as a climate justice organizer, right? And I think if I could trace it all back, like just bring it home, it would be, I care about our mother so deeply. I care so much about Mother Earth, not because I don't know, not because anybody told me to, but because from the moment that I was born, I recognized the color of my skin on the earth, the texture of my hair on the leaves, the connection that we have between living beings. And I saw those, and I could not comprehend the genocide that is happening, not just to our people, but straight up to the land, I think indigenous folks, us, we have a very intentional connection to the land. I grew up with my grandfathers from the rainforest, and my mom will tell stories of him walking around with yerbitas on his forehead, being like, this is me curing my headache, and I see those practices as sacred. It's hard to explain how horrific it was my first time going to a mining site and actually witnessing the scar on the earth that is mining. And I think for me, I guess that's what did it for me, how my journey into abolition began, is witnessing violence over and over, done to Mother Earth, done to my own body because of my undocumented status, and just realizing that there is no compromise. There is no compromise. We have to fight back. We have to defend her. And that the very existence of settler colonialism, capitalism, imperialism, which all ties back to the existence of prisons, of police, of immigration, all of those forces, their very existence is the enemy of the earth.
Oh, that was so well said, and you're so right. Compromise is not doing us any good. We need a full liberation. This whole damn system has got to go and burn. Last but not least, Jordan, would you like to go?
That's gonna be hard to follow up. I'm gonna try. No, yeah, y'all got my gears turning. I think I'll start with my path to abolition. I think started very similar to y'all and a lot of folks watching. It's like growing up and just witnessing all the violence around us structurally that's inflicted on our peoples. And like, we grew up sort of itinerant poor, so we were always like moving, chasing that job, and everywhere we went, it was all, within the same county, but still chasing the jobs. Everywhere we went, everybody was just struggling and fighting and like being attacked by the police and the cops and yada, yada, yada. And so I didn't even realize it until much more recently on how like deeply the structural like systems of harm there impacted me, particularly within regards to like the criminal injustice system. They needed content warnings around death and self-harm and stuff like that. But one of the things that just destroyed me, I was 8 years old, and my Tio, Billy, he ended up killing himself, and I loved him. I loved him so goddamn much. And I didn't find out until later. This sort of led me on to 10 years of very severe clinical depression from the ages of 8 to 18 or so. And I didn't realize until I was older, it had been shared with me, that the reason that he had killed himself is because, he was caught up in some gang stuff and street stuff. And, as being a dumbass 20-something-year-old, he ended up killing somebody and was facing life in prison. And he was also schizophrenic. And so he went off his meds and then decided to end his life. And I didn't know any of that. I just knew he was gone, right, when I was a kid. And that just destroyed me, along with a few other things that ended up happening. And so eventually I was sort of, reaching the same point in like going on 10 years of severe clinical depression. And I was like, man, I can't do it anymore. And I, was blaming myself because, when you're a kid and stuff, you see everything going wrong and all the harm being caused to everyone you love. And I think there's a way of internalizing that and blaming yourself. And I realized, though, that if I was gone tomorrow, that still wouldn't help anybody. And so there must be something structural there that's causing all of this. And I didn't have the words for it at the time: colonialism, imperialism, capitalism, cis-heteropatriarchal, white supremacist bullshit, right? But there was something there. And I was like, okay, so if I'm going to live, I need to do something to fight that, whatever it is. And so that's what's led me on the political path that I'm on. And my organizing path is like, how do we end these systems that just keep destroying us? And why did my uncle have to die? Why was he put structurally in these situations in the first place, where he didn't get help for his schizophrenia? He didn't get help when he was on the street, and he enacted violence, and violence was enacted upon him. Why the fuck did that happen in the first place? And so, yeah, that's the first time I talked about it publicly. So I was like, sorry.
That's okay. And take your time.
Yeah.
We're here with you.
Thank you. So yeah, that was sort of the start of my path towards abolition. It was also like a simultaneous sort of organizing intellectual journey. I went and got a master's in criminal justice from a pretty rad school with pretty good professors. And for me, abolition in practice and abolition within our organizing goes down to the most basic levels, right? We need to figure out, and I think something I keep coming back to recently in my reflections, the fundamental point of abolition is accountability. And who are we accountable to? And for me, we need to be accountable to our ancestors. We need to be accountable to our comrades behind the bars and in the cages. We need to be accountable to the movement as a whole, and we need to be accountable to each other as a team. And we need to figure out how to then implement that into organizing strategies and the building of teams and movements that's going to literally destroy it, right? We need to take the sort of philosophical things and turn them into movement building strategy. And so I'm very practical. Let's just literally just shut down the prisons. And so that's what my crew and I have been doing. That's what we've done. That's what we're going to keep doing.
Sorry, thank you so much for sharing your story, and may your uncle rest in power, and to all those who have lost their lives due to the violence that the system imposes on us day in and day out. Really sorry. Let's see. So let's go a bit deeper and talk about more questions. What kind of global histories do we need to put into our eyes as we fight for abolition here in the Southwest or here in the US? Maria, would you like to go?
Yeah, for sure. And I think, first of all, I just want to thank the fellow panelists here, because I think that we represent different peoples from different histories and different traumas in this place. And Jordan, thank you for your vulnerability and bringing up those traumas, right? I think that as far as global perspectives, I definitely want to, bring forward my own ancestry, right? And these people we out here, if you're eating a potato, thank you. You're welcome because we invented those. If you're eating any corn, you need to be thankful to the homies here in so-called Northern America. They invented corn, I think that's like, when I think of global perspectives of abolition, is exactly looking at that, right? Is looking at what are the global ways that our communities have already been strategically like building, whether it be communities in Cheran that literally straight up had already been forming self-governance long before the government even came through. And then once the government came through and massively let down that community, the community in Cheran kicked them the fuck out and decided, no, this is actually, we're just gonna go back to doing things the way, the ways that we know best. Whether we look at the Zapatistas community in Chiapas and the ways that they also have been exercising their self-governance and really putting forward those momentums. I know there's more communities, and that's why I'm grateful that there's other panelists here that can talk about the different practices in abolition. But I know myself, I definitely look to the South with great admiration and with great humbleness, that's straight up my people, that yeah, like I said, that wealth of indigenous knowledge is really, it exists and it's there, and they can try to, tell us that we were just some dirty natives, some dirty people when they came through, but we know the truth. We know that our communities were very capable of organizing themselves and of organizing each other, and continue to do so for the last 500 years. I think as far as like, what does it mean here in the Southwest? And I'm just going to talk about the Southwest, but I know, Jordan, you're not in the Southwest, so feel free to talk about any, other spots. But I think as far as like here in the Southwest, there's a lot of connections, right, to what's happening right now with COVID-19 here in the Four Corners region, the way that it's reaching some of our indigenous communities here. And I think that when we see the bigger picture spectrum of revolution, of activism, of community organizing, a lot of times, honestly, the Southwest really does get forgotten and really doesn't get a lot of attention, which for me is honestly tragic, because the Southwest has some of the most intentional, most beautiful communities, at least that I've seen, that I've witnessed here. Driving in the back of a pickup truck from the res to the res, that's how I got radicalized, right? I didn't go. I don't know. I guess here in Utah, it's a little hard sometimes because you're just so immersed in the culture of Mormonism and of settler colonialism, capitalism. Some facts for folks that don't know Utah is that less than 1% of people in Salt Lake City are Black, and less than 5% of people here are people of color. So it's been a really intense process for a lot of us, finding those ways of affirming ourselves and affirming our identity here in this community. But I think, again, like what I think that a big part of abolitionist practices need to be about that. It needs to be talking about like who needs help and who's struggling, right? And looking at our communities not as not with the Instagram model of who's got the most likes and who's got the most followers, but instead looking at it as, pull out a map and ask yourself, like, where did I hear about this thing happening? Where did I hear about this thing happening? And if you're not hearing a lot from the Four Corners region, it's not because we don't exist. It's because there's no, we don't have as many likes as y'all do, What else? Yeah, shit, what else can I say? Just honestly that, yeah, I believe in abolitionist futures in the Southwest region. I believe in abolitionist futures for our community. And I believe that our people here, we're fighting, we're actively fighting. The existence of so many groups springing up lately here in Salt Lake City is testament to that. So, we're gonna get there, I promise, but it's a slow, it's not a sprint, it's a marathon.
Oh, those are really amazing points. Ashley, would you like to go next?
Yeah, so that's a big question. And so as Ella was speaking, I was like thinking in my head, like, where would I point people to? For me, I mean, and I think this is probably going to be kind of a common theme in our answers, right? Like, looking at who our people are, right? Like, who do I come from? Where do I come from? And so one of the most empowering things for me when I start thinking about what it means to resist like the structures and the systems, and like not even like just resist, but also to like do what I can to chip away at those in my own like little corner of the world. I really do. I think of my ancestors, right? Those who were stolen and enslaved on this land, who in their own ways resisted, right, by the moonlight, essentially, like resisted what slavery was trying to do to them. You know, like there's so much power. I'm trying to think of how I want, like the thoughts are in my head, but I'm trying to think of how I want to bring them forth. It's like, there's so much power in the knowledge that, like, for instance, hoodoo, right? Hoodoo is a religion that's indigenous to this land. And it's a mixture of African traditional religions, root medicine, and you can kind of say there might be like a little bit of Christianity in there, but Christianity might have been like a little bit of the language spoken to get these practices, like to practice these things without fear of like death, right? But like I promise I'm gonna make a point here, but but hoodoo in itself is like a political and structural resistance. Like it is a people who are oppressed in like the most like extreme ways, right? Like saying, no, but we remember who we are. No, but we remember that this land takes care of us. And we remember that we love this land and that this land has medicine. And then there's also medicine and freedom in our songs and in our prayers and in the love we have for our ancestors who came before us, right? Like, so yeah, you can do what you're gonna do, right? But guess what? We're still here and we're still surviving and we're still using this fucking magic to like fuck up your systems and to make sure that our babies come into this world and have a fighting chance, right? And so most of my kind of perspective comes through a perspective of reproductive justice, comes through a perspective of plant medicine and herbalism and what it means to like to remember the land. Another instance, and I would imagine that a lot of people know, but I'm just offering up. What shaped a lot of my praxis and a lot of my framework was the Combahee River Collective, a group of like fucking rad-ass, radical queer women from all different walks of life, all different races and ethnicities, coming together in solidarity with each other to fight in a radical way for liberation, and to say that like your systems, like the way that y'all are telling us to do shit is not working, and we rebuke that. And what we're gonna do is remember how strong we are, and remember how strong we are as a collective, right, of marginalized and oppressed peoples, and come together and resist and fight, and then also uplift what it means to be like radically authentic and radically joyful, right? Because that's like something that we don't often get in our communities, is the ability to experience joy. And I think that is something that I'm always highlighting. So I think that the idea of especially Black joy is so revolutionary. And so that I'd offer that folks start to read about the resistance of joy and the resilience of joy amongst oppressed peoples globally, and also here on this land, and also start to like look beyond organizing. And I'm not taking anything away. I promise I'm not taking anything away from Martin Luther King Jr. because, like, you know, everybody loves MLK Jr., but also like looking at what it means to organize and to fight beyond those instances that are kind of just shoved in our faces all of the time, like Malcolm X, who I adore, like Martin Luther King Jr. Like, let's start looking into who Audre Lorde was. Let's start looking into the Combahee River Collective. Let's start looking into like these factions that didn't get, I mean, you hear about the Black Panthers, right? But like, let's start really looking into who the Black Panthers were and what they stood for. And also realizing that like these little factions that you don't hear about, and I don't want to say little, these factions that you don't hear about, or these people that you don't hear about, were really the people out here like putting fucking boots to the ground and saying, okay, we see you, MLK, we see what you're doing over there, and guess what we're gonna do over here, because this is where we live. You know, we live on the ground, we live with the people, we live in these very real instances of what it means to like fight tooth and nail every single day for your life and for your liberation. And so we're going to bring that into an organizing framework and see how we can get in solidarity with each other, and how we can like bring our numbers to power, you know? I don't know. Is that making sense? I'm sorry, y'all. I feel like I'm just like, when I ramble.
Nah, like your rambles are amazing. You are dropping so many gems. And I think Brinley linked the Combahee Rivers Collective as well in the chat. So y'all, please check it out. It is amazing. Jordan, would you like to go as well?
Yeah, it might also be a bit rambly ranty, so don't worry, Ashley. No, I've just got so many broad and specific thoughts on this, so we'll see how it goes. But I think, like, if we're looking at global histories that inform abolitionist practice, right, I think we need to understand abolitionist practice, as both of you have already said, as an anti-colonial, anti-imperialist project, right? And so if we're drawing from anti-colonial scholar Akila Babimbe's work, he's Cameroonian, based in South Africa, he's got this concept of necropolitics, right? As an analysis around Western colonialism and imperialism, in which entire populations are deemed disposable and treated as such, Black, brown, indigenous. And this is an affront and a critique to Western intellectuals, biopolitics and things like that, claiming the state fosters life when in reality, for the vast majority of the globe, Western colonialism, imperialism fosters death for our peoples, for our planet, etc. And so I think if we're looking at from that angle of analysis, then we need to consider every single time someone resists the weaponization of violence by the state, actively or passively by the state, passively through the dissolution of resources in our communities, passively through, well, a lot of it's fucking active, right? Actively through destroying the rainforest, building these dams, building these mines, killing indigenous environmental organizers, highest rate of organizers and activists killed globally in the environmental movement. There's a Guardian, I believe, keeps track every year of how many, and it's in the hundreds. every single act of resistance against that, whether it's organizing resources for our peoples globally or fighting the violence of the state, that's a struggle we need to learn from, because we need to begin conceptualizing, in my opinion, abolition as like all encompassing. And I'm not saying anything new, right? I think it was Beth Ritchie, Miriam Cabo, Angela Davis, somebody brilliant elder Black woman that said that, abolition's a horizon, right? Abolition's the creation of a world in which I think this one was Angela, creation of a world in which we don't need to rely on prisons, the police. Let's extend that and look at how we can learn from sort of every grassroots struggle globally. And I think also we need to consider how we can learn from the past. And I'm thinking specifically of like the internationalism between the Palestinian liberation struggle, the Irish liberation struggle, the IRA, Black liberation folks in AIM here, like our revolutionary ancestors, who some of which are luckily still here, but the majority of which were imprisoned or now behind bars or killed by the state. They have a history of figuring out how do we work together internationally, share tactics, share strategy. And I think we need to figure out how to work on really like rebuilding that in a material sense. Okay, that was a bit more coherent than I thought it was going to be. And I can't remember the questions coming forward. I have some comments around the movement in the UK. I've spent off and on living in London and Canterbury over the past couple of years.
What kind of framework can we build on towards trying to achieve this like global connection towards building abolition? Ashley, would you like to go? No, it's cool. Very yellow. What about you or Jordan? Either or.
I can do it. All right. Oh man, Jordan, shit. Ashley, Jordan, you're both so brilliant. This is so good. The resources for folks. Yeah, no, totally. We're gonna, at the end of this whole thing, because there's like so many hundreds of you that have signed up for this abolitionist conversations, we're just gonna send y'all a whole list of resources. Like, yeah, no, absolutely. And me and Jordan, I'm sure we can talk about those. Ashley, a bunch of the other panelists from past conversations, we'll loop y'all into an email and compile those. Amal, the question was, how can we?
How could we build towards, sorry, my bad. Let me get the exact question up.
Nah, good. I got distracted.
It's all good. What kind of frameworks can we look to in our vision towards building abolition and trying to connect to these struggles globally?
Okay. So what kind of frameworks? I think, well, first of all, like community is a framework, right? Like we don't need to recreate the wheel. That there's abolition. There's been, as long as, so the first abolitionists were, as Ashley mentioned, were Black folks fighting against their own slavery, right? And so when we already have a framework of abolitionists existing as long as settler colonialism has existed, I think that we don't need to recreate the wheel. We can look towards these communities. We can do our research. We can link up on that. Second, I think is as far as how do we build it, right? Because we could be on this webinar. We could be here probably for hours talking about our dreamy ideas of what abolition should look like. But at the end of the day, like, let's get practical. Let's talk about how do we build it. And I think that means that we need to establish a practice of abolition, and we need to establish a discipline of abolition in our communities. That means questioning ourselves, like, how am I complicit within the systems that uphold this carceral, punitive mentality onto my community, and how am I actively fighting against that? How am I divesting from that? And what am I building instead? When I lived in Brooklyn for a little bit with some family members, and I was a part of this circle of folks. We worked with the Audre Lorde Project, Safe Outside the System folks, and they straight up built this thing. You know, it was called Safe Outside the System, SOS, and it was a community network where folks would phone call each other when cops needed to be called, because, or neighbors were saying cops need to be called, and they were like, no, you actually don't need to do that, right? And I think that's something that for us rural folks, it's a little bit harder because you know, here in the Southwest, sometimes you try to talk to your neighbor about something, and you know, my neighbor once pulled a gun on me and a homie once at a Food Not Bombs here in Salt Lake City, which was terrifying, by the way. And that's not, you know, unusual. We've seen a lot of violence happening here at these protests lately. And so I think that then that means you yourself have to like take into account also like, how do I approach the situation in a way that is also keeping myself safe, right? Because as Ashlyn mentioned, sorry, I just called you Ashley. As Ashley mentioned, when Ashley talks about, you know, other ways to fight against this shit other than being an activist, I'm really receptive to that, because for years I was that activist that literally like, you know, bullhornets to the bed, you know, where's the Google Doc? I got you, you know, whiteboard in the back of the car always, you know, and eventually I got really burned out and I stopped being that activist. And one of the things that I realized is that my community organizing, my activism was still valid even when I wasn't actively that person. And that you never stop being an abolitionist. You actually become an abolitionist for the long term. My mentor and inspiration person, Cindy Milstein, has this thing where she says, don't become an anarchist for a day or for as long as it's trendy or for as long as the punk song is playing. Become an anarchist for life. And what does it mean for you to have that practice, you know, built into your everyday? So for me, even, you know, like I'm putting butter on a piece of toast, but I'm doing it like an anarchist. You know, I'm petting the cat like an anarchist. And I want us to think about that, you know, when you're an abolitionist, like I'm checking in on my neighbors. I'm doing it as an abolitionist. You know, I'm gonna go get some water. I'm gonna do it because, you know, my body's sacred and I want to keep my body, you know, full. I'm gonna take care of myself because I'm an abolitionist. I'm gonna take care of my community because I'm an abolitionist. I'm gonna call my mom because I'm an abolitionist, right? So stepping away from this idea that an abolitionist practice has to look like constantly going to the streets to be in the face of police, and instead looking at ourselves and each other as, yes, it's those things and more. It's taking care of our community, taking care of ourselves, and building for the long term, because I want those abolitionist futures to exist. You know, I tell people a lot that one of the biggest things that radicalized me was being separated from my mother at 12 years old and not being able to see my mother for literally over a decade because of borders, you know. And for me, when I think about that, I realize that my abolitionist practice is, I want to make sure that ICE is abolished because I believe in children's rights to be with their families. And I want to make sure that the police is abolished because I believe in our communities need to have worlds without violence. And I believe in abolition in general because I believe in beautiful worlds for our community. We deserve those beautiful worlds.
That was amazing. Honestly, like, I'm still somewhat speechless. Like, we do deserve those beautiful worlds. And yeah, still, sorry, like, I'm all over the place. Jordan, do you want to go next? Like, that is a lot to process, but it's also really cool. Like, I never thought about it. Like, every step you're doing, and do it with intentionality and do it as an abolitionist. Like, that's super important and super cool. But Jordan, you next.
Oh yeah, and I think that's sort of like key is what you were getting at, Marietta. Is, I don't know, I've been thinking a lot over the past few weeks about sort of the insidious way white supremacy sort of like, you know, it's internalized in all of us and we have to root it out, right? But I think we don't do enough work rooting out how it changes our perceptions of community and individualism. Because from sort of my analysis, like I've been to 50 cities over the past 3 years in the US and the UK and in Europe, very white places, and places with strong histories of Black and Brown struggle, Indigenous struggle. But the problem I keep seeing the same problems everywhere I go. And I'm autistic, so my patterns are what stick out to me is a lot of patterns. And I keep seeing the same patterns crop up in grassroots movements and stuff like that around issues with communication, issues with capacity. And for me, as I'm like reflecting on it, I think a lot of it ties back to how sort of westernized white supremacy prioritizes the individual over the communal, right? And so I think part of what we need to do in moving forward in developing these frameworks is root out that insidious intersection of individualism and white supremacy and how it enacts in our daily practice, or how you were saying much more eloquently, how do we be an abolitionist, right? What does it mean to be an abolitionist, right? An abolitionist means communal care. It means, us really like sitting down, and I think we need to work through at a much more fundamental level. Like I sort of critique a lot of neurotypical folks or folks that communication came naturally to them. I had to learn it the hard way, right? By very actively figuring out like, oh, they said this, why'd they say that? And all these things, communication was difficult for me is what I'm trying to say. But because of that, I'm very sort of like hyper aware of the way that these different structural patterns impact our communication styles at an individual level. And I think if we don't sort of root out that white supremacy that tries to embed this individualism within our movement work, then we aren't actually going to get to a true sense of community. We're just going to have a lot of like infighting and not meeting each other where we're at. And I think, all that shit's learnable. I learned it. These are learned skills that we are systematically deprived of under conditions of, late stage white supremacist, heteropatriarchal, settler, colonial, neoliberal capitalism, right? And I think part of what we need to look at is, yes, our ancestors, our communities have the knowledge we need. We need to employing Adrienne Murray Brown, come from a place of abundance and view instead of a place of scarcity when it comes to our movements and our peoples. But I think we also need to acknowledge that white supremacy as it's existed, neoliberalism, settler colonialism, imperialism, has also actively eroded a lot of the knowledge that we had and our communities had. And I think we have a responsibility both to rediscover that knowledge and figure out how to reemploy it. And help all of our peoples regain the skills that we have historically been denied as part of this genocidal project, right? And so for me, that leads to, I think, one of the things that I see missing in a lot of places in terms of frameworks is building intentional, reflectional, pedagogical space, not inside the academy, because fuck academia. It is the intellectual weaponized arm of all of this shit. I'm just gonna say how many published articles within academic journals have shut down prison. I don't know. I'm going on one. Yeah. Anyway, make this a bit shorter though. Yeah, I think we need to really begin to imagine what do liberation schools look like in our communities. How do we create intentional reflectional space in which, like Mariella was saying, we're not actively having to get on the Google Doc or get on the bullhorn every day. We need to create spaces for our peoples to be able to really engage and build these skills and build their analysis collectively and co-communally. Yeah, that doesn't really get into the international part, but I'm gonna shut up now.
No, it's all good. One thing that's been super strong with both of y'all that y'all are talking about is how this is a communal discussion that needs to be had. And it's not so much as oh, I'm just here inserting my knowledge. It's no, y'all got knowledge, let's bring it together. Let's figure it out as a collective. And I feel oftentimes that is forgotten in a lot of these organizing spaces. It's hold up, homie, you are no different than us. Let's genuinely engage in this conversation. Last but not least, Ashley.
Thank you. Oh my God, y'all are, yeah. I'm just over here having goosebumps listening though, for real. yeah, I didn't want to go first because I was having a hard time, again, like quieting my mind, I guess, enough to like be able to answer the question. But I appreciate Ella and Jordan for like the things that they have said. Two things that I wanted to mention for the resource list. If y'all could look up the Move community in Philly, that was a Black, yep, yeah, a Black anarchist community that was actually bombed by the US government. And then also the Project Row Houses of Houston, which in their inception were, again, kind of this communal idea of like taking care of one's own community, but eventually kind of had to disband, but now they're kind of bringing it back, and it's organizing through art, essentially. So that's what the community does now. But I guess in terms of frameworks, everything Ella and Jordan said, everything. And then I would just add, for me personally, the framework of reproductive justice has been my personal journey into what it looks like to build like community resources that that exist outside of this structure, which is meant to be genocidal to us, right? Like the idea of reproductive justice is that, you know, you have the inherent right, essentially, to either have babies or not have babies, depending on what feels best and most authentic to you in your life. But also beyond that right, you have the right to be sort of uplifted and protected in that choice, right? So where I sit, I'm a doula, but mostly I support in birth and postpartum, and I'm lucky enough to be able to work mostly with parents of color here in Salt Lake City, Utah, like so Black parents, Indigenous parents, and Brown parents. And so what a lot of my work looks like is, okay, let's build a village, essentially, because I grew up with that mindset. Like I heard all the time, it takes a village, it takes a village, it takes a village to raise a child, it takes a village, you know? And so I grew up in a mindset of community amongst Black and Brown women mostly, who said, okay, your babies are my babies, okay? Your younger siblings are my younger siblings. If you don't got it, I got it. And if I don't got it, her over there, she got it. And if she don't got it, well, we're gonna figure out how to fucking get it. Cause, you know, because nobody in the community is left behind, right? And that, so when I think of the framework of reproductive justice, it kind of billows out into most other facets of like organizing and life in general. For me, like I live in a very like village mindset. Like my home is your home, my food is your food, my money is your money. And like because what I don't want you to do is I don't want you to get caught up in this fucking system, right? I don't want you to get caught up in the system that like devalues you, that abuses you, that kills you. So what can I do to create a community around you and a safe space around you, so that instead of going to this like white supremacist system, like you know you got it here. And if you do eventually have to go to a white supremacist system, right? Like people have to go to hospitals, right? Eventually, sometimes they just have to. Like, how can I help you advocate for yourself so that you don't get caught up in the, like, how do we let your doctor know, or your whoever the fuck you're dealing with over there, like whatever paper pusher you're dealing with that doesn't give a shit about you, how do we let them know that somebody does give a shit about you? And it's not just one person, it's 10 people, it's 100 people, and we know what the fuck that you're trying to do, you know, like we know what you're trying to do to our brother or our sister or our sibling, and we're not going to let you do it. And so that's kind of that's my mindset. So I'm all about building the collective here. Like, how can I start to be an agent in radicalizing my neighbors? How can I go to my aunties and say, no, but look, auntie, I know that you say like respectability is the way to survive, but it's not, auntie. Like, you know, how can I go to my cousins and tell them, like, while academia is cool, like the people who care about them are right here, you know, the people who will like save them are right here, the people who will always fight for them are right here. And then how can I leave Sugar House, Utah, and go over into Glendale and Rose Park and like connect us all, you know, like how can I connect our communities? Again, power in numbers is what I always say, because I think that one of the beautiful things that I will say that has happened as a result of COVID-19 and as a result of kind of the uprising of the city in response to like Black Lives Matter and response to justice for Bernardo, is that those of us who are really just trying to fucking survive here, like, we see who sees us, you know, and these communities have been mobilized in defense of us, and we've been mobilized in defense of our neighbors and our communities in such a strong way. And I just don't want it to go away. I don't want us to like, and I know that like those of us who do it and it's not going to go away, but I mean on a larger scale, right? Like, I don't want it to go away. I don't want people to forget, especially people who would presume that they are separated, right? Like, I'll use myself as an example. I live in Sugar House, and Sugar House is kind of, you know, it's fucking Sugar House. It's like, if any of you, I don't know, but it's like, it's, I guess it's a suburb. You can consider it a suburb, but like a millennial suburb, right? Where people are still like fucking poor, but like still trying to like keep up with appearances or whatever, you know? And I'm separated from my folks, right? Who are on the West Side, or who live in areas with more people that look like us. And so I get emotional when I talk about it, because I guess the easiest answer for me would be to pick up and move and go be with my people, you know? But I also want my people to know on the West Side that they got motherfucking Ashley Finley and whoever the fuck she talks to over here. So you're safe in Sugar House. Like, you come here. You got a home in Sugar House. You know what I mean? And so I feel so passionate about building the collective, and also about building intergenerational organizing. Like, it can't just be me, 30-year-old me, you know? Like, it can't be all of us 30-year-olds who like fucking realize that academia was like a fucking lie, and like have decided now that like now that we've got our 1.5 million degrees and we're in like all of this debt, have decided, oh shit, maybe you know, maybe we got to do something more. It can't just be us. It's got to be the babies, man. It's got to be the babies. And I call everybody younger than me pretty much a baby. So it's just the auntie in me. But it's got to be the babies. And we got to let the babies know that we see them, that we value them, that they have so much worth and so much experience. And like, that they know what the fuck they're doing and what the fuck they're talking about, and they know that what they're seeing is true. Like, that's what I'm on. Like, I'm on that shit. I'm like, yes, like, let me figure out how to get these young people a platform, because they're doing the work. Like, my old ass with my bad knees and bad back is not out there, like, in the streets marching. You know what I mean? Like, they're doing the fucking work. And so that is, like, that's what I'm on 100% all day, every day, 7 days out of the week, 365 days out of the fucking year, is like, let's get this shit together. Let's get together and like be collectively minded. So that's what I have to say.
Sweet. No, like, what thing to add on to that, like, I think one of the coolest parts, like, during all these uprisings and stuff, is just seeing, like, how many, like, high schoolers and middle schoolers are taken to the streets, destroying shit, letting people know what's up, like, seeing a bunch of kids just talk back to police. Like, it is so powerful to see them reclaim their power, and to know that there's an entire community defending you and backing you up. Like, just seeing, like, the different generations out on the streets has been such a beautiful experience. But I feel like we could start going to general questions, or we could do another question. Either or, it's up to y'all. Do you guys go one way or another? Sorry.
Wait, what are the choices?
Oh, sorry. We could start going into general questions. Like, the people can comment down below the questions they have, or we could ask another. Either or.
I'm down for Q&A if that's what you want to start.
Yeah.
But also, I don't know, Ashley, Jordan, do y'all want another question from the panel?
I'm down for whatever. I'm open to Q&A, like whatever you all feel.
Same.
Sweet.
Can you
Okay.
give us a preview? What would be is that the last question that you were gonna ask?
Yeah. So the last question was kind of a mix of like everything that we were talking about originally, but what can the global movement for liberation and prison abolition movement learn from each other?
The global movement for prison abolition and
Liberation, yeah.
yeah. Damn, I mean, shit, the thing about, okay, wait, are we down to answer this and be quick? And that way we can go Q&A? Does that work?
Yeah.
Okay, word. Okay. My controversial answer that maybe is not too controversial is that I believe those movements are one of the same. I believe that the same organizer that shows up tired to the 2 o'clock meeting usually shows up tired to the 4 o'clock meeting, and that honestly it's the same fools. Like, and I think anybody that's even, you know, been organizing, maybe dated an organizer, you know, been homies with an organizer, you can attest to this, is that you know, we're literally it's the same people, right? And that's again for me why it's important to start blurring those lines even more intentionally now, especially because of the state repression, the government trying to brand and identify Antifa, which is just whack. Yeah, anytime I see that more and more, I think it's more and more important for everybody to be Antifa and for everybody to become anti-fascist. Because if you're not an anti-fascist, odds are you're a fascist. And I think, yeah, the way that these different worlds learn from each other is by having conversations, breaking bread with each other, getting to know each other, and that no matter what ideology or you know, my mom used to say this: no matter what church you go to, as long as you believe in the same faith, you know, we're all singing for the same cause. And I'm not religious like that, but I believe in, you know, Creator, and I believe in you know, in Mother Earth, and I feel like no matter which part of the struggle you're at, as long as you're like doing so with an anti-colonial, anti-capitalist, you know, anti-imperialist practice, I think that we're already on the same side. So why not start having those conversations, those intentional international conversations about what it can look like for us to yeah, to fight together.
That's so real, especially since all of our liberation is interlinked. Like, none of us free until all of us are free. So what are we doing to make sure that everybody in this space is protected? Brinley, also, sorry, like before I hop on to the next panelist, please drop your questions down below. So while we're there answering questions, we can also start looking at those. Jordan,
I just want to say one more thing too. Like Asada Shakur said, we have nothing to lose but our chains.
Hell yeah.
True. No, yeah, I'm going to provide a real quick reflexive general critique of the movement is that it needs to stop being us that are always showing up to all the meetings, having the same people. I think that is a limitation that like we've faced. And my ongoing thing is always critique myself as an organizer before I critique the people, right? And so to me, if I keep seeing the same people at all the meetings, I'm failing as an organizer. My job as an organizer is to skill up the people that I'm working with, collectively skill up, you know? And I think that's, and this is what I've been learning just in terms of like how widespread that problem is. With all the places I've been, it's been the same, the capacity issue, the same faces being there. And I think, yeah, that's part of sort of my commentary earlier around how do we sort of like relearn the things that we've lost. And I think part of that is organizing is a learnable skill set and the development of political analysis. And I think we need to start working on just developing that everywhere and developing spaces for that everywhere. But real quick, I wanted to shout out just like, I've learned so much from organizers in the UK and my time spent over there. So I want to do a real quick shout out for like Sisters Uncut, abolitionist, anti-domestic violence organization, folks with Reclaim Holloway as well, that oldest and largest women's prison in the UK. It got closed because London, the Her Majesty's Prison Service wanted to sell the land because it's right in central London in Islington, and use that money to build new women's prisons, and then use the land for high budget real estate. And organizers there occupied the women's prison right after it got shut down, and were like, hell no, y'all need to do all these things with this land, including building a women's health center and a women's center and like making affordable housing on it and stuff like that. And they're still in ongoing struggles around that. And then community action on prison expansion over there. They've been fighting mega prisons is the terminology that they've been using. The UK government was planning on building 10,000 by this time. 10,000 beds. They've only built actually 206 because of the badass organizing of folks over there. So yeah, go check out those folks. I've learned a lot. And one of the ways we can learn is just by being together. So what we did is one of their organizers, one of my dear friends, Kelsey, at Kelsey MXMO on Instagram. Me, her, and the Fight Toxic Prisons crew, we did last summer a 2019 Southern, hang on, let me get it right, I was so hyped. FTP 2019 Cutie Puck Southern Solidarity Tour, where we just like went and did trainings on abolition, anti-carceral feminism, environmental justice, transformative justice, and just like hit up a bunch of 12 different cities across the South. And just like sat in community with folks and just learned from each other about like all the badass work that's going on. Obviously, it's one thing to just like intellectually know it, but it's another thing to be like, oh yeah, it's literally Black women holding down all the most radical work every city you go, including like queer Black women being the majority of those folks. Every single city, there's badass work going on. And I think part of what we need to do is have that sort of perspective internationally, and even within these occupied territories, so-called United States. We just need to, after COVID, and this is a good example, like get out there and just meet the folks doing the work and learn from the differences and similarities between each other's struggles.
That's so cool. Mad respect to all the work that y'all are doing out in England. Like, that is badass. Ashley, your turn.
Yeah, I really just want to refer to what Jordan and Mariela said, like, because I think both of those are so important. Like, intentionally kind of blurring those lines, because a lot of us we really are the same people, right? Like showing up to all of these things. And because I think it's important, right? But I also think it becomes a habit, right? It's like, oh, I might not like have been in this specific group, right? But I like know this framework, or I know how to organize, or I know what skill set I can bring. So let me just go over there and like get to work, right? And so I think it's intentionally like kind of blurring those lines, you know. Again, this idea that like we are all kind of pieces of the same puzzle, you know. And then also like what Jordan said is like getting out, like, so my therapist actually just told me this is essentially like, especially in a place like Salt Lake, which I feel like Ella and some of you can like really kind of attest to as well. It can be hard because even if you do work in other places, or you know people in other places, like Salt Lake has a way of like vacuuming you in, because there's so much shit to get done here, right? And so like you almost get like tunnel vision, right? And you forget that you have a whole network of people elsewhere. And so that's like a big hey Rox. That's one of my networks. But that's like a really big like thing that I find for myself, is that, you know, I'm going from meeting to meeting, from org to org, from event to event, but also like they're all here, right? And that's not to say that I want to turn my back on this community. That's not at all what I mean to say. But I also want to say that like there's so much valuable work that can like expand us, like being done in other places, right? And being done by other people with different perspectives, or like a different set of the same types of problems, you know, that they're like fighting or organizing against. And so I would just offer that. And I would also offer this, that I'm not sure is entirely like the exact answer to this question, but I just want to say it anyway, is like, y'all have got to sit the fuck down and rest, like for real. Like eat, take your medicine, take your vitamins, drink water, take a shower, right? sleep, like in itself. And this is something that I am like, it's been a journey for me to learn, because I am a workhorse, like I can be, and I can be like, I need to lend myself to the solution to every problem, you know, or there's work to be done. Like, what am I doing sitting here watching like Steven Universe, you know? Like there's so much work to be done. But like I need for these panelists, for the people in this chat, I need for Uplift Climate, like I need for y'all to take time and rest. I need for you guys to refuse, for even if it's just a few hours, I just need for you to refuse to work, okay? Because that shit is radical. To say like, no, I'm gonna sit the fuck down, and I'm not gonna work for capitalism, right? And I'm not gonna like work myself to an early grave against it, right? Like, because my ability to rest, and my ability to recharge, and my ability to take care of myself is like such a strong resistance in itself, that tells, right, to a system that tells, especially us people on the margins, people of color, Black people, Indigenous people, that we always got to be either the fucking saviors, or we got to be like the fuel for the machine, right? Like there's nothing else for us, right? And those are the only options that we have, but they're not the only options we have. We have options for thriving, We have options for thriving authentically in ourselves, for enjoying the shit we enjoy, for eating the cheesecake, for drinking the water, for taking that shot, for watching our shows. We have options for petting that cat and that dog. Like, for real, people. Like, if there is a thing that I can leave you with when I talk about what it means to be in direct resistance to the system and to start abolishing this shit, it's just sit the fuck down. Just sit the fuck down. For real. Okay? I'm dying.
That is so real. Rest is such a powerful thing, and I feel like it's such a hard thing to like practice. Like, as you were saying, like once you get into the wheel of it, like you're constantly going and going and going. But yeah, that is so important and powerful. Now let's start the Q&As. I think Brinley's gonna help out with the questions.
So the first one we got in was from Martha, and she asked, in the immigrant rights movement, what's the abolitionist perspective or strategy? I'm responding to the DACA rescission and anti-immigrant decisions coming out of DC. So whoever wants to take that first, just hop on.
I could take it from just some of the stuff I've done with the Abolition movement. So from the immigrant movement perspective, so first of all, the immigrant movement is really conservative. A lot of people don't realize this because they see, they see a movement that talks about, abolishing ICE. But even the abolish ICE, that's something that the homies were saying, but that big orgs, that I'm not gonna name, were for years honestly ignoring. And as far as what the general rhetoric has been is it has honestly put us in a position where to be an undocumented abolitionist was kind of to have a target on your back, So for a while we weren't really talking about what is the undocumented abolitionist perspective, right? But so I can only speak from the conversations that I've had with myself and with other undocumented comrades. But the general feeling of what it has been is that, sorry, I'm looking for the question again. Yeah, the abolitionist perspective, strategy responding to the DACA decision and the anti-immigrant decisions coming out of DC. I think that the abolitionist perspective on that from undocumented abolitionists that are actually doing this work in the front lines has been basically to talk about the long-term spectrum of abolition rather than the short-term, right? It's much like Ashley was talking about is how a lot of us are still struggling to learn how to rest, right? I think that especially as migrant people, we're very aware that our criminalized identity has made us a target. And so I'm still learning how to rest. And I think my comrades are also similarly learning how to slow down because you don't want to become a target. That's no actually what abolition, being an abolitionist shouldn't mean that you're putting your life at risk over and over and over, although it can mean that. Being an abolitionist, when you have a criminalized identity, it also means like assessing your own position within the system. And as DACA folks, we are actually very, very much within the system already inside of it, right? When you have your DACA, they fingerprint you, they put you in the system. If you want to apply to see your family to advance parole, you have to fill out a form, and that's an advanced parole. It's literally like you're being paroled. You're already basically in a criminalized fashion as an undocumented person, right? So within that lived reality of a criminalized identity in an everyday level, I think that a lot of undocumented folks have tried to be like straight up resistant of the good immigrant narrative that DACA encourages of us, and instead to try to like criminalize ourselves, like I like telling people like, not only am I undocumented, I'm straight up illegal. That means I did an illegal thing. This is an illegal body, like I like to say that it's like the best things in life are illegal, y'all. So, for me to embrace my identity as an undocumented abolitionist, I think is the highest form of self-love, because it means loving myself, my full self, including my undocumented identity, and the choices that my body made when they crossed these borders. I think that, yeah, that my response would be within the community. That's what's happening, right? Trying to like teach other undocumented folks like, hey, I know you may have heard this lie that in order to belong here, you have to belong to the system. But actually, the most beautiful thing about us is that, you know, we're criminalized identities. Fuck it, let's embrace it. And so I think that's something that the undocumented abolitionist community is trying to do with each other in very intentional ways. But that's still, it's a fight, because again, we have these conservative narratives of immigration that are very like, si se puede, here to stay, you know, here to stay where? On this stolen land? Maybe you should ask yourself what that means, you know? I'm gonna endorse, I don't know, Joe Biden. Why would you endorse Joe Biden? I'm gonna endorse my Tio Bernie. I don't know if that's your uncle. That's not my uncle, right? And so I'm really, as undocumented abolitionists, having those conversations within our community, checking ourselves about where do we want this movement to go, and what does it mean to actually fight for abolition, to abolish ICE, right? One of my greatest critiques of Alexandra Ocasio-Cortez is that from the very beginning, she was very like, oh yeah, si se puede, abolish ICE, you know? And then as soon as she had a vote, she actually voted to just give more funding to ICE. And that's something that, you know, people don't talk about often, because when our critical analysis is only based on Instagram likes and memes and into whether the brown girl talks about wearing hoops in office or not, I think that we forget that that's the system intentionally narrowing our gaze. And once we break out of that box, once we look at, and especially as undocumented folks, once we look at the system as, we don't even have to be illegal, they're making us illegal. That's their decision. They're criminalizing us. Then it really does become wide open, is that the sky's wide open. You know, sky's the ceiling. We don't have to settle for being citizens. If anything, we can just continue to fight for a world without borders.
Thank you so much for that thoughtful response. Do any of the other panelists want to take that question on before we go to the next one?
I don't have a direct comment in terms of like the stuff going on right now, but I do think like in terms of the broader abolitionist movement, like this is something that we really need to figure out how to draw lines of solidarity around, is between the fights against prisons, jails, et cetera, as well as the fights, I'm thinking specifically on immigrant detention centers, because, you know, there's the myth around like, oh, private prisons are the really big thing, right? When it's only 8% of prisons that are private, majority through GEO Group based down in South Florida here, and Core Civic, formerly Corrections Corporation of America. But in a lot of those folks saying that on panels and things, what's not brought up is, you know, the day after Obama was like, we're cutting contracts with private prisons, he then gave, his administration approved $1 billion for a new immigrant detention center it was either GEO Group or Core Civic, I'm pretty sure it was GEO Group, which represented 14% of their total revenue for the coming year, and they were getting that no matter what, right? So that point's not brought up a lot in these critiques of, oh, it's not just private prisons, but when it comes to immigrant detention centers, it is Core Civic and GEO Group, and we need to be plotting much more broadly. These are bottlenecks, right? Two corporations controlling over 90% of the immigrant detention center contracts. And shout out to a bunch of badass organizers in South Florida. A few months ago before COVID, they you know, just out for a stroll and happened to lock down with bike locks and barrels the entire GEO Group headquarters for the day. And then the state came in and tried to give them all conspiracy charges that were later dropped and shit like that. But yeah, I think we just need to like be strategizing much more broadly about how to attack these choke points, these bottlenecks within ICE's power and within those things in a way that really builds on the lines of solidarity that are so naturally there. We just need to really intentionally build those relationships. Yeah.
Yeah, can I just say one thing before we So this is something that I kind of take a little bit of the back seat in, like this topic, because I am not like undocumented, and I am not an immigrant, and I do not come from people who immigrated here. But one thing that I will say as a Black organizer that I want to just like make very clear is that this issue is our issue as well. Like, we cannot sit and I think that, again, I think like kind of what Ella was saying is like the media has done a really good job of kind of like tunnel visioning us, right? And into like thinking that the issue looks one sort of way, like and what I want to be careful about here is that I don't want to say that this is so messy, but I hope that y'all hear what I'm trying to say, because what I don't want to say, I don't want to fall into that trap of saying that like brown people are not important, right? Like, because that is not at all what I'm trying to say. But what I am saying is that Black folks need to realize that like this kind of us against them mentality that has happened in those kind of more conservative organizers that we talk about, right? Like Black folks who think the way to freedom and safety is through like respectability politics. It like, what I want to say is that this is absolutely our issue, right? People in ICE detention centers look like us, right? And if there's anything that I can appeal to you on, like if I can't just appeal to you by saying like this is fucked up and you should care in general, like what I want to say is that when you hear about these issues, like the media has done a very good job of telling you it's one kind of person, right, that is being affected by these issues, but that there are so many other people who are affected by these issues, like including your neighbors who you might not even know, you know, like you might not even know that. So that's kind of just a point that I want to make, because I get into these arguments a lot and I'm always really careful, and I also like sometimes really want to be careful because I don't want to do more harm than good when I talk about these issues. But like, and I think the broader idea of like Black, like this idea of like Black against brown, like is something that like we really need to start looking to in our own communities. Like, and I think that drives a lot of the conversation that I hear, again, like that I hear amongst especially older Black people, right? Like people who believe that like working within the system is the way to get like white people to leave us alone, essentially. And so I really want to just highlight that. And I'm sorry if I said something unclearly or if I said something offensive. I don't mean to. I'm just trying to make a point, and I hope that point came through.
No, yeah, and I just want to say, like, on the flip side of that, like, you know, half my ancestors are from Texas since before it was Mexico, right? Like that now, though, now that every time I go home, I got Trump supporting people in my family, way darker skin than me, right? There's like part of this thing, I don't know, I feel like there's a drive to whiteness is what I call it in a lot of Latino communities, a drive to want to assimilate and be white. That's destroying us, one, and destroying, like, it's that thing we were talking about earlier in terms of like white supremacy and settler colonialism destroying our ancestors and our ancestry. So I think, one, we need to, like, within the Latino community, Latinx community, like, own up to that dynamic, because it comes from a much deeper insidious anti-Blackness that runs in non-Black Latinx peoples that needs to be addressed and actively worked out. Yeah. And same caveat, these are, yeah.
Yeah, I want to speak to that actually, because You know, like motherfuckers out here, like having DACA for like longer than 2 years, they act like citizens. They're straight up just like, oh, you know what? These non-Americans, they're talking about cutting off the term, like once you have DACA, that's it. Like that's, you know, like legality only for the people that came here recently. When the refugees was happening, when all of the Central American refugees were coming through Mexico, we saw so many anti-immigrant rhetorics coming from the immigrant movement. And that's I really appreciate Jordan and Ashley, you know, talking about checking our own community, because I think that's where I'm at. I'm like, if I have to check my undocumented homies that are out here saying some bullshit, like I'm willing to do that. And I think that's also, like, naming it what it is, right? It's white supremacist, it's carceral mentality, it's punitive mentality, right? And I think I really appreciate these conversations because they usually like lead us to this. It's like, we all know where we're going. You know, we are going to get free. We're not, are we going to throw people under the bus? No. Are we going to, you know, focus on the liberation of some, but not all? No, we are going to get free. That's the objective. That's what abolition is the pursuit of freedom for all.
Sweet. So our next question is, how do y'all feel about supporting organizations in the streets that are fighting for reform rather than abolition? How can we inspire and teach those people about abolition?
Okay. I think it goes back to the whole, when I'm an abolitionist when I pet the cat. I'm an abolitionist when I eat my breakfast. I'm an abolitionist when I hit the streets, right? When I hit the streets and I see people that are shouting a reformist rhetoric, I think at that moment I pause, I examine the situation, and I ask myself, am I putting my body in danger by being near these reformist assholes? I saw recently a video of a bunch of people that ganged up on this person who was wearing black bloc, and they like handed him over to the police. Like literally in the video, they were like, they grabbed him and then they handed him over and then they cheered. They were like, we got rid of the enemy. And that to me is, again, like, one, that's the dangers of normalizing fascism and of alienating anti-fascism, of giving this attitude like an Antifa anti-fascism is not an everyday rhetoric. And then two, that's liberal. Like that's some liberal shit. So I mean, I know people here in Salt Lake City who are liberals, and I'll still say hi to them. You know, we'll still hang out. We're still friends on Facebook. It's chill. Right. But it's at the end of the day, if my body is gonna be in the line, if my comrades' bodies, I'm not gonna vouch for a person with reformist tactics into the abolitionist meeting, because, you know, I'm sorry, I ain't trying to exclude you or be cliquish, but I'm scared for my homies. I'm scared for my comrades. And I think that, you know, for me, abolition is a love language. It's the way that I express love for my comrades and the way I express love for my homies, for my chosen family, for my community. So not trying to say that there's no room in the community for reformists, but definitely I like to keep people just, you know, at the length of how much I can trust them. And I think, yeah, I can, you know, I can see you. I can maybe accept the bottle of water that you're extending to me. I'll politely tell you, no, I won't sign your voting little clipboard that you're extending to me, you know, whatever. But at the end of the day, like that's as far as I can take it, because, you know, these folks that are out here on the streets, they have different tactics than us. When they're kneeling with cops, they're showing what kind of world they want. When they're chanting, this is what democracy looks like, without having active rhetorics, active like conversations about what their own ideas are when it comes to direct democracy, or or what reform versus abolition looks like. That's they're showing us that the world that they want is different than the world that we want. And I don't know if my undocumented brown body can survive in that world that they want. So out of a need for self-preservation and out of the need for the safety and security of my community, I'm often not going to go to that protest, actually.
Yeah, I think so in a lot of things that I do, I have this like mindset of protecting my peace, right? Um, and so Ella knows this, like, sometimes I just be ignoring shit. I hate it. I hate to say it, but like sometimes I have to, because in my experience, right, people who are loyal to the idea of reform and loyal to the idea of liberalism, right, and again, this all circles back to respectability and proximity to whiteness, right? In my experience, there's no kind of like, I can give you all of the resources. I can send you all of the links. I can even buy you a book and send it to you, you know, but it just doesn't work, right? Because there's this idea of, what is it called? The sunk cost fallacy, right? This idea, and I know this because a lot of the people who are older than me, older Black people, are these people that we're talking about. The people that are calling for reform, the people who think that voting is what's gonna get us to freedom, right? The people who post things like, people died for your right to vote, right? And I'm always like, they did not die for my right to vote. They died because they were Black and white people wanted to kill them, right? That's it. That's like the sum the sum of what you should be saying. And so it's so frustrating for me, but I also realize that there's this idea, again, of that sunk cost fallacy, this idea that, you know, especially amongst older Black people, that we have spent so much time, like we have done all of the things, right? We went to college, we got a good job, we dressed nice, we didn't sag our pants, we wore a tie, we straightened our hair, we we did all of these things. We spoke your English, you know? We did all of these things that you told us that we should do to get free. And like the idea that we've spent all of this time doing those things and they just won't work, like that was essentially time wasted, is heartbreaking, right? And I have compassion for that. I do. I have compassion and I have understanding for that, right? The idea that your heroes were murdered and we're still in the same place that we're in is a hard thing to accept, you know? And so a lot of the times I move out of frustration, but I also move out of a sense of compassion, right? For people older than me, and saying, okay, I see you, I see what's going on here, and I see that your idea of reform comes from a place that that means, you know, like that means that you need to hold on to this idea in order to have hope, you know? And like Black hope can be a powerful thing, you know. I'm gonna throw that out there, but it's also a survival tactic, you know. And so my survival tactic is different, and my survival tactic is frustrated by your survival tactic. But what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go over here and I'm gonna do what I can do to get us actual change, and I'm gonna let you have your peace. I'm gonna let you have your peace, because that's important too, you know. But also, to kind of go off what Ella said, there's this idea of safety, right? Like I can't be with you if you want to kneel with cops. I can't be with you if you want to hug cops. I can't be with you if you want to vote for Joe Biden. Like I just can't. I simply cannot, because what you're doing is you're being complicit, right, in a system that is killing us. Because to be honest, and I'm gonna say something kind of controversial, right? To be honest, like this system, like none of that is gonna save any of us. It's not. But also, the people who are most in danger are the people like to my left and my right, right? Like the people who are getting affected most by your idea of being complicit within the system, the people who are getting killed, right? Because you're voting for Biden, the people who are getting abused and beaten up and jailed because you're kneeling with cops are the people that I see every day, the people that I talk to every day, the people that I love, the people that I invest in, that invest in me. And so I can't rock with you. I can't be around you because I'm putting myself, but I'm also putting my people in danger, right? So like, I might passively send a link, right? Just in the hopes that maybe possibly you'll click on it and resonate with it. But for the most part, to answer the question, I don't waste my time. I don't.
Yeah. I take a very different approach to both of you, but I just want to say, like, I definitely fully understand where y'all are coming from. I'm not talking in the streets, though. I'm just talking, like, in general when it comes to reformists, when it comes to liberals, like, pretty much, like, all of my organizing's, like, in this side of the South, right? I don't know what it looks like in the Southwest. It seems like y'all have a shit ton of badasses all over the place. And we got a shit ton of badasses in the South doing revolutionary work, but it takes quite a while to drive between all of us because we're spread really thin, right? And so, and like a lot of the stuff that like our crew does is campaign work against prison construction and jail construction in rural communities, where the best you can hope for sometimes are some reformists and some liberals, right? And so I want to like put that out there, and also just like put out sort of, you know, like, one, I'm white passing, I'm male passing. It's very easy for me to go into those spaces and to do that labor because I'm not being attacked left and right, right? And so I want to like state that positionality, one, but also state, two, that I do think we can have within our movements, this is one of my broader sort of patterns that I've noticed in all the places I've been, we have a tendency to be insular. And I think that's a danger. And I think it's in a way unintentionally gatekeeping our abolitionist imagination when we need to be figuring out how to build sort of what I call revolutionary infrastructure. Now, when I say that, I'm saying every one of us, especially those of us that are most actively attacked in those reformist and liberal spaces, we don't actively need to be in them, but we need to figure out who's going to be in them to be intervening. And I view this as an insurgent strategy. My role, I see, is insurgency within reformist and liberal spaces. I'm gonna go chat them up because often, like, they're the closest thing to an abolitionist I can get when it comes to attacking this prison or shutting down this county jail or something like that. So either way, like, we're forced to work with them. And much more conservative folks, I've spent like years sort of just really working through how do we get the message across in a way that gets there, right? And I'll give a real quick example. I was giving a talk in Port Talbot, Wales. This is one of the sites that they're going to build the new mega prisons at in the UK. And the entire resistance, very white town, very small town, long history of, you know, mining and labor organizing. That was like 100 years ago. And they wanted to build a new prison because the steel mill in town was shut down. And the government, UK government, was promising the prison as its economic replacement, which is the same thing we see here in rural communities. And this little group of grannies, like white old grannies, 4 of them came to the workshop, and these were the 4 that were organizing against the prison, but they were doing it because they were afraid of, you know, the racialized crime. They're afraid of crime and criminals being in the community. So what we did was instead we sort of broke that down. It was like, are you afraid of crime? Or are you afraid of harm? I think that's the key thing, is breaking down, like, you're not afraid of crime, quote unquote. Let's actually look at how prisons produce more crime, produce more violence, how the cops produce these things. And if you're afraid of harm, if that's what we're getting at, then we can start working at building this political analysis. Anyway, yeah, those grannies fucking loved it. I remember one of them was knitting and just like headbanging, and I was like, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And they ended up shutting down that new mega prison. They stopped it, which was going to be built on untouched, protected marshland. Well, it wasn't protected, which is why they're going to build it there, but it was like, yeah, environmentally destructive, etc. And so I do think that as an abolitionist movement broadly, we have a collective responsibility in figuring out how do we strategically engage as insurgents within these liberal reformist narratives and organizations in a way that's going to help call them into a broader abolitionist imagination. Yeah. So somebody's got to do it. We need to figure that out collectively. I'm not saying everybody's got to do it.
That actually segues really well into the next question, and I think we'll close it out after this question. What do you think are some of the most effective ways or the core key first points to educate and inspire others to consider abolition as a real valid solution? Old stubborn conservative uncles, liberal white friends, etc. And then they said, thank you so much. This webinar is absolutely incredible, which I would like to echo to the panelists.
Yeah, thank you so much for that question. And thank you so much, Jordan, for touching on one of my favorite topics of all time, which is rural organizing. Me and Ducky were just talking about this because I think we're going to start some rural organizer circles. So that way some of the rural organizers from different spots and small city organizers, right? Salt Lake's only at 300,000. We have some Pittsburgh homies, they're also at 300,000. They're like, yeah, we should talk, right? Because I think that this is the bump on the road that most abolitionists are coming to, right? Especially those of us that live in, somewhat more liberal, radical cities, right? Here in Salt Lake City, it's very, very normal to be, walking down the street and to see an anti-fascist stickers. It's very normal to have a punk coffee shop to go to. It's part of our everyday here to immerse ourselves in the politics of resistance. But what does it mean to actually practice resistance? Not just to doodle the anarchist day on your notebook and then close it up and then say, well, that was some good that was some good practice right there, right? And I think that means that people need to look towards rural organizing. I was raised in a town just 20 minutes north of Salt Lake City, where there are still active KKK chapters, and where once my coworker told me proudly that her dad would drive on weekends with his buddies down south to go chase immigrants off the border. So for me, I do think that as a brown undocumented person, I think I see my positionality different than what you named, Jordan, as your own positionality in life. But I also do think that within the constraints of that, there's brown people in rural places. There's conservative brown people in rural places that I could be having conversations with. A lot of the ways that we've been having those conversations here actually was one of the most successful campaigns we had was the Utah tar sands campaign, when they tried to build a tar sands mine out here in Utah a few years back. And after year after year after year of encampment, we finally drove them bankrupt enough that they just had to quit the whole project, And we didn't just do that by camping out there, putting up tripods, having people arrested, We also did that with tribal leadership, and we checked in with the different indigenous folks in the region. And I'm not gonna lie, sometimes it was hard, especially because there's connections to some of the tribes to oil, that's where the wealth comes from. But one of the things that one of the young people in my program here with Uplift told me recently was, he said, well, all you folks are about just transition. You folks love that term. You folks love to say, just transition. That's what we're going towards for climate justice. But what you don't realize is that the same people that are coming to our communities, to our indigenous communities, this is him saying, the same people are coming to our indigenous communities, then they say all that shit, they give you the leaflet, but then they leave. And then after they leave, all the jobs are gone because you have successfully shut down the mine. And that's where all the jobs were going, right? And with the Utah tar sands mine, we were, there wasn't active drilling, mining happening yet. We shut it down before it even was operational. For a lot of these communities in rural communities, they're mining towns, they're oil towns, their infrastructure is really like built around the infrastructure that actually like us as environmentalists sometimes are trying to like disrupt, right? So what does it mean to have an abolitionist movement that actually looks at those problems, not as like the tunnel vision, like we need to shut down the mine, but also specifically like we need to work with this community, we need to build community with this community. What does it mean for city folks to, especially big city folks? Maybe we could approach it from a step down, right? Like big city folks, check in with your smaller city folks. We're struggling. Smaller city folks, check in with your rural communities nearby. We're struggling, right? Because I often feel, type of way about having had to leave the place where I grew up to move here to Salt Lake City. Not because I don't love Salt Lake City, which honestly I do. I love Salt Lake. But because, just that feeling that like, wow, there really was no like way for me to survive there, because of the white supremacist violence that was there. And so, what does it mean then to build those bridges with those displaced communities that are in similar positions? And what does it mean to actually like engage in good rural organizing, not just parachuting into the community?
Ashley or Jordan, did you want to take that question on?
Am I unmuted? Okay, yeah. I guess I can take a stab at it. Yeah, I appreciate what Jordan said, the perspective that Jordan and Ella have said about kind of understanding that everybody, like, this whole thing is kind of on a spectrum, right? And like that everybody is somewhere, right? And like I'll be honest, like let's see. So this is like a little bit of a tough one for me, to be honest, but I kind of want to express some thoughts. Because I've had a lot of people, especially like with starting the newer chapter for Black Lives Matter Salt Lake City, come to me and ask me, like, what does it mean to be an abolitionist, or what does it mean to want to abolish the police or abolish the prisons? And for me, the answer, again, and I guess all of my answers have been like to have a mindset for the collective, right? So like, here in Salt Lake, there was just an $81 million budget passed for Salt Lake City PD, right? So when I talk to people, what I talk to them about is things like this, and I put it in like kind of terms that, or like examples that are easy to understand, right? Like also in Salt Lake, we have this big controversial thing that's happening where children in schools who can't, I mean, this is different, I guess, with COVID-19, but in 2019, children in schools who couldn't pay for lunches just didn't get to eat, right? Like who couldn't pay their lunch bill couldn't eat. And a lot of children in Salt Lake City and then Salt Lake County depend on school lunch to be able to eat, right? Because a lot of them are coming from areas like from shelters, right? And they don't have access to food security. So like I juxtapose those two things. I say, so you mean to tell me that it's okay for the police to get $81 million when we have children who can't even eat lunch at school, who can't eat lunch, like, and I don't remember how much it costs, but I remember when I worked in the school system, I was constantly paying for lunches, right? And I was constantly paying for meals after school for kids. So, like, tell me why then it's justifiable that our police department, who is actively killing people, right? Who is actively killing people every year, why is it justifiable that they're getting $81 million for so-called, diversity training? for so-called diversity training and sensitivity training. But we have children, Black and brown and refugee children in our communities who can't eat. Literally, at the one place they should be able to eat, because it is the one place that the state is requiring them to be. Like, they are required to be at school regardless of their home circumstances or their financial circumstances, or whether or not they have a home, right? They're still required to be at school. And at that one place that they should be able to get a meal, they cannot. Yet our police department is getting $81 million. And usually I get somewhere, right? I get somewhere with that point. Because one thing that people cannot argue is that the funding for the police department is absurd, especially when we have people who do not have homes, especially when we have people who do not have fair access to medical resources, especially in COVID-19, when we have kids who cannot eat meals, right? So why then are starving children, why then are they less important or less valuable than the police force? Why then? And it's a simple question. And if you can't answer that question for me, if you can't give me like a good question, if you're at a good answer, if you're stuck, then I need you to talk to me a little bit more about what it means to defund this fucking police department and start abolishing these systems so that our kids can eat and that our residents have access to mental health resources, and like people can live in homes in the winter time, right? Like, come on over. Let me talk to you about that. Because obviously you understand something. You understand a fraction of this argument that I'm making and the shit that I'm working for, right? So, I don't know. That's just kind of, I don't know if that answered the question, but that's where I'm at. And that's where I usually start, because I get this question a lot of times because, again, I'm kind of in juxtaposition to some groups here, some Black organizing groups who are calling for reform, who are kneeling with cops, who are having photo ops with police and telling the cops that, you know, they care about them. Okay, so you care about them, but you don't care about the babies, the Black babies who aren't eating at school, right? Or you care about them, but you don't care about the Black mothers who are dying at 4 times the rate because the medical system doesn't see them. Okay, got it, you know? Because they don't have access to medical resources or reproductive resources, or a simple OB who cares about them and sees the disparities in the birthing room. Got it, okay. So what you're telling me then is that you are in support of genocide, and usually that's a stopping point. Usually I can get somewhere, and that's why I do what I do, and that's why abolition is where we need to be.
Can you remind me of the question real quick? Because I was too fired. It just blew all thoughts out of my head.
Yeah. What do you think are some of the most effective ways or the core key first points to educate or inspire others to consider abolition as a real valid solution?
Mm-hmm. Let me think. I mean, I think part of it is just a pedagogical approach in terms of like, we need to have like ongoing, like I said earlier, intentional space with community in which we can even discuss these things. And I think like just really then digging into, we've got like FTP, our comrades in the UK on the Cutie Puck tour, et cetera. We, you know, built up some Abolition 101 curriculum that we can send anybody that's interested on like having these introductory conversations around abolition. And a lot of it is like bypassing those ridiculous sort of initial questions that are like, oh, what about X horrific crime? It's like, okay, let's take a step back. And let's like walk back that question. Is like I said earlier, are you afraid of crime or are you afraid of harm? And how is, like Ashley much more eloquently and passionately put it, how is the system enacting violence and harm on our communities? And why would we go to that same system through the cops, through the police to try and solve it? It doesn't make sense. It's bad. It's bad organizing and logical practice. But yeah, I think a lot of it's just myth busting at the beginning, right? It's like the police are here to serve and protect. No, let's look at that. Let's dig into that. Prisons are where we keep the bad people from the good people. No, let's dig into that. What about the murderers and the rapists? The murderers, like, how many people did the police murder a year? 6% or something for 0.2% of the population. How many people that have engaged in sexual assault actually go to prison? Less than 1%, less than 10% are even tried. When the cops get to a domestic violence call, the vast majority of the time, they don't do shit. They leave. They don't even record it. Like, why the hell would we go to these people that are actively dismissing, killing, and not even showing up when we need them? We don't need them. That's the point, right? And I think a big part of it is, like, and what I've been trying to think through is how do we, like, then sort of build, like, a lot of the work I do, my crew does, it's sort of like kind of creation and destruction are like one and the same, but ours is on the destruction side. Like, we shut down prisons, we do these things, and I'm trying to, like, think now, how do we think more broadly in terms of what could be what I'm trying to figure out a word for, full spectrum, holistic, roots to canopy campaigns, in that at the same time as we're building up our teams that are so healing, so, like, fully encompassing of us as people, because that's the type of team we need that's going to be able to take on a prison or take on a police department and tear it down and get those resources and redirect those resources. How do we go from the beginning to the end stages of really turning our campaigns in which we're trying to destroy the thing into campaigns that are going to build our people and build our community through doing them? So, because we just do these one-off things, and that's not what it's going to take to win. We need to, like, be taking that full spectrum approach that really sort of, like, nurtures our people in the fight and in the struggle while they're doing it, and gives them space to breathe and rest when they need it, and builds, like Adrienne Maurice Brown says, at the speed of trust, right? How do we build trust? And then how do we implement it into the world we're trying to create, turn the broad abolitionist horizon into everyday practice?
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing your thoughts. That does it for the questions that we had. So just want to remind people that we have one more session in this webinar series next Saturday. We're going to be going into kind of some successes and wins in the abolitionist movement, so things to look forward to and how to kind of keep this energy alive that a lot of people are feeling around abolition. And I would just like to invite the panelists, if you have any final closing thoughts, to go ahead and speak if there was something that you felt like you want to end with. Now's your time.
I just want to echo what Jordan said about the speed of trust. You know, when you're, you know, again, like when you're an abolitionist, you're an abolitionist when you go to bed early, so that way, you know, your homies know that you're well rested enough so you can stay up a little late while doing jail support. You're an abolitionist when you choose to actually take a screen break because this work is heavy and this work is long term. And you're an abolitionist when you feed yourself, when you take care of your body, when you decide that, you know, that these systems tell us that our bodies must look a certain way and we say, fuck that, I'm fat and I love it. You know, you're an abolitionist when you cherish yourself. You're an abolitionist when you drink some fucking water. I really appreciate my comrades in the struggle here at Uplift, and also in many of the other circles that I want to shout out. I want to shout out Justice for Bernardo, the Rose Park Brown Berets, Decarcerate Utah, not just Uplift, but it's specifically the fellowship. I want to shout out Abejitas Autonomas and the Migrant Mutual Aid Utah crew. And I want to shout out the Utah Abortion Fund, because I think that in being in community with those folks, we try to build a really good practice of moving forward at the speed of trust instead of at the speed of capitalism, of listening to our bodies and listening to each other, and of honoring that abundance comes from fighting that scarcity mentality that sometimes tell us that we have to rush because everything is happening. So everything's been happening so fast for 500 years. Everything's been happening so fast to our people for 500 years plus of settler colonial existence, you know? And just reminding ourselves, you know, as anti-colonial folks that, you know, the work's gonna get done. It's predicted. It's been foreseen, you know? We are part of, we are part of that, that beautiful resistance that our ancestors foresaw. And what a great thing, what a great feeling it is to go to bed, fall asleep and say, you know, dear great grandfather, you know, I'm here honoring your memory by being an abolitionist. Thank you.
Yeah, Ashley and Jordan, go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to say I am so full of gratitude, and love for the folks that I'm on this panel with, for Ella, for Jordan, for Amal, for Brindley, for Uplift Climate, for having me, and for uplifting me, because I'm gonna like get a little teary-eyed, but in the past month or so, it's been really hard, and I know I like yell about sitting the fuck down, and I've had a really hard time doing that, right? Because everything is everywhere all the time, right? And but I want to say that these are the folks like that have been reaching out to me and uplifting me and making sure that I'm okay, and making sure that like I'm taken care of. And I do get really, I'm sorry, I get like a little choked up, because I even see some people in the chat that have supported me in ways that I could have never imagined. And so I am blessed to be part of this community, this village, this network. I am blessed to be able to be in a space where I can say these things and I'm seen and I'm heard. And I want to say that if y'all didn't know, I hope that you know now that I am in complete solidarity with you, that I am here with you, that I see you, that I hear you, that I love you radically. I love you in a revolutionary way. That what's mine is yours. And I offer that people see that, right? That people see the way our communities are taking care of each other, and know that that is what it means, right? That's what abolition means. It means getting with each other and starting to build your community outside of the system that wants to see us dead. Because that's it. And I'm sorry, trigger warning, content warning, whatever. That's just what white supremacy and capitalism wants. And so we have no choice. We have to become liberated. We have to liberate ourselves. We have to liberate each other, because if we do not, it will continue to do what it has always done, and that is kill us. And if any time is, like, if you can see it at any time, you're seeing it now. You are seeing it now, but you are also seeing what abolition in action looks like. You're seeing it with bail funds. You're seeing it with mutual aid. You're seeing it with meal trains. You're seeing it with doulas and midwives of color. You're seeing it with the Utah Abortion Fund. You're seeing it with climate justice. You're seeing it with people going to Indigenous elders and gathering wisdom and being in community with them. You are seeing it. And so it can't be this like huge, lofty, unattainable idea. You're seeing it. You're seeing it happen. And if you can't deny the good of it, then you need to get the fuck on board, okay? Like, if you can see that and say, that is good, that is beautiful, that is love, that is wonderful, that is sacred, then get the fuck on board. That's it. That's all there is to do. So I love you, like endless, eternal love. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
I love you too. Oh my God, no. I love all y'all. Damn. Yeah, I didn't know sort of what to expect. Like, I've been very, very impressed from afar by all y'all's work in Utah and surrounding areas. And I'm just really grateful to share space with y'all and for all the folks that are participating. And I do think, for me, sort of the center of my politics, sort of like going off of what Ashley said, is the engagement of revolutionary love, right? It is the centering of that ability to be soft, to be vulnerable, to like really enact into our politics at its core a sense of love for our community, for our ancestors, and for all peoples. And that to me is the route towards liberation for all. And so, yeah, I just wanted I'm very like pragmatic thinker, just like structured in to a fault sometimes. But back when all this was starting, Fight Toxic Prisons, part of the work that we do every year that I think is coming up and is horrifying me is like hurricane direct response, like trying to get like folks inside out of the path of oncoming hurricanes, because folks behind bars are always the ones forgotten and left behind. And even within like our movements, which I think is something we all need to like think about and seriously consider, is how are we building between bars, outside bars, behind walls? How are we building collectively together and not leaving our people inside? And so this is intense work, and like we're all in the thick of it. And I think we also need to realize that we are in, because of our work, because of our movement ancestors' works that we've been building on, right, for 500 years, where I think we're seeing the sort of shift in collective consciousness, the political shift we're going to see within our lifetimes right now, right? Everybody's fed up. We keep getting fed, oh, it's a bad apple, right? No, it's not a bad apple. The whole tree's fucking rotten from the roots to the top, and it needs to be uprooted and turned into mulch and turned into soil and fed back into our communities, right? Defund the police. And like, no, we're not taking any of these bullshit reforms anymore everywhere, everybody, right? I think people are finally seeing, no, this is just a PR strategy and a pacification strategy. Body cameras, trainings, even this idea that they're actually going to prosecute the police, right? They're not going to prosecute them. They never do. They fire them and then just dangle it in front of us. Maybe the DA will announce a prosecution or something like that to pacify the struggle over a number of months. No, we just don't need them on the streets anymore. We need to start from that beginning stage of the initial interactions with the police, and we need to stop that and then go through every single step of the system, from the courts to participatory defense, bail, and just literally shutting down prisons, shrinking the size of the carceral state itself. We need to fight it at every possible angle. But that's intense. And so FTP, we sort of came up with sort of 6 check-ins for high intensity organizing. And so if you're like in it, like here's a few things that might help you get through it. One, make rests and breaks a priority, right? If you need to rest, if you need to take a break, everybody in your crew should be actively, that's number two, actively encouraging and celebrating when you take a rest, right? If we're making rest a priority, we need to actually celebrate it and be like, oh, you're taking the day off, hell yeah. Three, though, we need to actively communicate when we need to rest and how long we think we're going to need to rest, right? Like, I think this part is like challenging that sort of burnout culture that we have, in which we just go, 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 and then drop off the face of the earth for 2 months, which is a problem I've dealt with, dealing with, severe depression off and on. Like, I've done that. But if I can communicate to my crew that, hey, I'm in a bad place and I need a couple months, I think that makes a big difference. And then number four, make time to laugh, make time to play, make time to imagine together, even when you're in the thick of it, because it's through that play and through that imagination that we are going to build the worlds that need to come into existence, right? That we need to create. And then 5, give yourself and each other grace. Mistakes, frustration, dropping the ball, short tempers, all these things are going to happen. Being an abolitionist, to me, means we're going to actively account for these things that are going to happen. Conflict can be generative. Conflict is going to happen. Being an abolitionist does not mean pretending that it's not. It means we're going to make a commitment to ourselves, to each other, to our ancestors, to the movement, to our peoples, to engage in that conflict in a way that makes us better collectively and individually. And then 6, check in on each other, because we're all we got and we're all we need.
That was beautiful. I think we're going to need to share that list out to all the people who signed up for this. Thank you so much for sharing that. And Amal, did you have any final thoughts? Thanks so much for moderating. If you have any closing thoughts, feel free to.
I just wanted to say thank you. Y'all have been amazing. It's been so cool to get to know y'all and just hear the amazing things that you guys have been working on, and to also learn from you. So I think that was it. Thank you, babe.
Yeah, thank you, everyone. Have a lovely rest of your afternoon. See you next week.